Welcome to highlights of round 16 of the FDC. The race was held on 30th September, and unfortunately leading up to that, Steam had gone down. So that made things a bit difficult because a lot of the features in F1 2019 rely on having a connection to Steam. One of those features is the time trial leaderboard, and Meistermido was in the top 100, although he ended up getting knocked down to 101st. And sadly he wasn't in this race, but no doubt if he was he'd have been up at the front. There was drama right from the start of qualifying, as I was busy needing to re-invite someone as my car was leaving the pits, so I was just getting adjusted at the last moment as Rotograph blasted by. I'm one of those people that uses force feedback wheel with gloves, so we were both lucky that my car didn't stray left as I was putting my gloves on. Later on I let myself get distracted by a car at turn 16 and spun. Darrow had a similar incident, nudging one of the barriers that like to rip your wheels off. Unfortunately, cars don't bounce off of those barriers, even if you only nudge them slightly.
Oj, co się stało?
Alex had a hard crash at turn 14. The attrition didn't end there, as Rotograph retired after clipping the wall with only 4 minutes left in the session. Right at the end, Fragweiser was cutting corners, I presume in a rush to start one final hot lap, but just ran out of time. He would have needed about 5 more seconds to reach the line. On board with one of the Almighty's fastest laps. This wasn't the pole lap, but after this he set one that put him on pole. If there were full session replays then I'd happily show the pole lap itself, but as it is we have to rely on whatever the drivers manage to record. This particular lap would have still set him second fastest. With Wondorian 185 points in the standings, only the top 4 drivers were still in contention for the championship by this point. I think HD Gamer was free for this race but appeared offline, so unfortunately he didn't get an invite. This must have been my last race on the Thrustmaster Ferrari F1 wheel, as like TJD I'd moved to the Thrustmaster TSPC, which feels like a good quality wheel, but the game seems to suit controllers really well, as I did some testing with a USB Xbox 360 controller. I've been practicing the track and setups on a controller around this time because I felt that it was easier, but then sorting out the wheels and the pedals for proper races. I was a little slower on a controller, but only because I was more used to a wheel at that point. Years ago I used to play on a controller and then ended up being given a Logitech Driving Force GT wheel. I don't have much experience with this track and didn't have a great qualifying session, but I'd done a fair amount of practice, so I was feeling hopeful for the race. It looks like the Almighty was coupling ABS with the racing line, and ABS can be really effective in braking into a corner. In comparison, the traction control assist can really slow you down, so the anti-lock braking assist seems to be worth having on. You might be able to go a bit faster without it, but if you keep locking the brakes up during the race then I'm sure it'll eventually slow you down from tyre wear. As there was a mixture of 3 different tyre sets used in qualifying, it was difficult to tell exactly who had done well, and that's where I think the visualisation helps a bit. Certainly the front 2 look good. I've messed up the graphic again because I didn't consider that pole would be on the left. So the Almighty took his 3rd pole position, TJD had his best qualifying session so far, a 10th down from 2nd, Fragweiser 3rd, Alex rounding out the 2nd row in 4th, Blackbeard 5th, Bowman beside him in 6th, last of these soft tyres was Darrow in 7th, the Bumpy Flump on mediums in 8th, Italus 9th, yours truly 10th, Rotograph on the hard tyre just behind me in 11th and opted to start on the softs, and our championship leader Wondorian missed qualifying, so he started at the back on mediums. For once my start didn't seem too bad, but it wasn't long before I got squeezed while I had a car on my left, but fortunately the incident wasn't terminal. I moved as far left as I dared, as I didn't want to squeeze the car on my left. But on the theatre replay my left was clear a moment before the contact. The problem is I don't think anyone's obliged to back out at that point, so I was doing the safe thing by assuming there was a part of a car alongside on my left. And we've seen that you have to be careful with that, like what happened at Monaco. I'd started lifting the throttle for safety as I saw the squeeze, so I believe Italus still had his wing alongside me as it started happening. There just wasn't a spare moment for me to register and react to my left being clear. But again, I don't think there's any obligation for cars to get out of the way. So I don't know what you guys think of it, but as Bumpy Flump's car clearly had free space on the right, I think that was avoidable by him. On board with Darrow's start, and he also got squeezed but got away without damage.
Ale się spóźniłem. Totalnie.
The race did settle down and have some clean moments, but the start was clearly a bit chaotic.
Sorry, Daro.
Thankfully it wasn't as bad as Monaco,
Przepraszam.
but to avoid that I do think drivers have to hold themselves accountable and be careful where they place the car. The Almighty was overtaken by TJD at the start. In the background, Wondorian took some wing damage. Blackbeard and the Bumpy Flump would end up running over the corner as TJD led the race. The Almighty regained the lead, which wasn't captured on any recording, but a clip shows TJD fighting for the lead with a move that I thought looked a bit too aggressive. The Almighty remained ahead. There were a lot of battles in the middle of the pack, and thankfully nobody made any crazy moves here. I'm always happy to see battles go cleanly. Rotograph clearly had a bit more speed in the race compared to his qualifying time, as he had qualified in the hard tyre but started on softs. A few of us needed new front wings, but most drivers had a straightforward start. And Rotograph coming through on a fresh set of softs after using hards to qualify. Italus looks like his car was being spicy out of turns 16 and 17. Both of those corners had already caused some drama in qualifying. The F1 cars seemed to struggle with them. Wondorian wasn't having much luck, not only missing qualifying but also took damage at the start drama. He went straight onto the soft tyres and got his wing changed. I think he had forgotten to start recording, and while he was sorting that out at the start, his wing got damaged by the incident involving the Bumpy Flump's car and mine. Heading into lap 2, and it looks like Rotograph made a late move at turn 1, and he ended up losing a wheel as Darrow had nowhere to go. I arrived at the scene and cut the corner, so I still had understeer from front wing damage, and just didn't want to run into Rotograph. I had stayed out rather than pit because I wanted to stick to a one-stop strategy, and was just worried that pitting on the first lap would lead to really worn tyres by the end. Half of my front wing was still green, and my tyres were obviously fresh, so I was just hoping that I could stay out for a bit, but it was becoming obvious that the wing damage was worse than being on worn tyres at the end. There was a battle for third between Alex, Fragweiser and Blackbeard, all on the soft tyre, and as far as I know they had all gotten away without wing damage. That is until Blackbeard's car arrived on the inside, which looks to have made Alex's wing yellow. I believe Blackbeard should have given the position back, although that wouldn't have absolved him of the damage done to Alex's car. They continued to battle on lap 3. Alex was looking competitive even with his wing damage, and despite any incidents between them in this race, they clearly left each other room more often than not. On lap 5 it was Alex getting through to retake 4th, making it stick towards the end of the lap, but Blackbeard remained close behind. Then on the start of lap 6, I don't think it was clear enough which lane Alex's car was taking. The league rules do say that you have to make it clear if you're going left or right into a braking zone. Blackbeard's car survived the incident, but no doubt suffered some damage. By lap 10, Alex was on the medium tyre and went for a cautious overtake on Beaumont. I think Alex had some bad luck because his wing damage with Blackbeard may have forced him into all those battles that slowed him down. On lap 11, Fragweiser went for a move on TJD, but it was a little bit late. And in this league, if you make a late move, you're taking a risk because the car ahead isn't obliged to leave room for late moves. And this was to discourage dive bombing. Wondorian was doing well from the back of the grid up to second, but TJD was looking to be in an aggressive mood. He'd nearly taken pole on this round, and no doubt he wanted to retake second. Wondorian had the tyre advantage, but his tyres must have been worn down by this point. So it was not clear exactly if either of them had an advantage, but both were setting decent laps. They were side by side for the last 2 corners as TJD wanted to squeeze his front wing in. Wondorian edged ahead but ran out of curves. TJD would end up running over the corner at turn 2. There was a spicy battle over 8th as Italus and Darrow went wheel to wheel.
Stracił pozycji dużo.
The battle lasted for several corners. Darrow had little curves left but still had a spare lap of fuel to burn. He was burning fuel in mix 3 but couldn't take advantage of that for too long as it would overheat the engine. It looks like Darrow's car may have been understeering, which did him no favours. They were half a minute down but still on the lead lap, so they had another full lap to complete.
O, nie tak daleko aż. No to 2 sekundy do nadrobienia to nie jest jakieś...
I think Darrow put up a good fight, but Italus had the tyre advantage in this case and pulled ahead. Unluckily for Italus though, and Darrow may have been aware of this, Italus had 9 seconds of automatic time penalties. The Almighty picked up his 3rd win. The battle for 2nd was still ongoing. TJD made a dive into turn 14, but like Italus, he had a few seconds of automatic time penalty. So 2nd would go to Wondorian. It had been a good qualifying session by TJD, but also a good race by Wondorian. With his automatic time penalties, TJD must have been trying to build a gap to Wondorian. But as Wondorian had no penalties, then TJD would have needed a gap of 9 seconds to finish ahead. My tyres ended up lasting fine as I crossed the line in 10th. And behind me, I believe Fragweiser doing a 2nd pit stop had quite deliberately gone for the fastest lap. You don't get an extra point for it in this league, but it was certainly impressive that he took the fastest lap by more than a second. There was a disqualification for the bumpy flump based on what happened at the start, and I have to make a decision with these things, and I just don't want drivers to see all their efforts in practice ruined because of avoidable incidents at the start. And unfortunately this was his 3rd lap 1 incident of the championship. So a good result for Blackbeard in 4th, Alex in 5th, and their incidents were isolated between each other as they had only damaged each other. So I felt that they both suffered enough as it were. Beaumont a best result in 6th, Darrow in 7th, Italus 8th. Not my best round, but at least I got to the end of this one, unlike my mishap at Singapore. Fragweiser taking that cheeky fastest lap, and he does get 1 point because he's now placed 10th. And a bit of bad luck for Rotograph and his collision. So that was another dramatic round, and we'll be back with highlights from our 25% race at Japan, so we'll see you then.